Remember when Jimmy Chitwood quietly said, "I'll make it," and an entire gymnasium went silent? Gene Hackman, Dennis Hopper, and a team of real Indiana amateurs built one of cinema's greatest underdog stories. Today, we're counting down 15 weird facts you never knew about Hoosiers. Number 15, that opening shot. Coach Dale's car crossing a covered bridge into the small town of Hickory. Jerry Goldsmith's score rising underneath. The whole world of the film coming into focus. It feels like a place that has always been there. Here's the thing, it has not. Hickory, Indiana is entirely fictional. Screenwriter Angelo Pizzo invented the town from scratch because, in his own words, the real 1954 Milan team's story had no conflict worth dramatizing on screen. The exteriors were filmed in New Richmond, Indiana, a town of roughly 335 people. The schoolhouse sequences were shot in Nineveh. Driving footage was captured on County Road 175 East, near Crawfordsville. Director David Anspaugh and his crew spent weeks sourcing small-town locations across the state to build a place that had never actually existed. Pizzo's reasoning was creative survival. By stepping away from Milan entirely, he freed himself to invent a disgraced coach carrying a dark secret, a recovering alcoholic who used to know better, and a star player staging a mysterious personal boycott. None of those characters existed in the real story. All of them are what make the film work. Every storefront and courthouse square you recognize from Hoosiers is a carefully selected stand-in. You are not watching Indiana history. You are watching Angelo Pizzo's version of it, built from borrowed main streets and invented drama. But the film quietly tucked real pieces of the Milan miracle into places most viewers have never noticed. Number 14. The moment Hickory arrives at Butler Fieldhouse for the state championship, you feel the weight of something larger. The crowd, the officials, the sense of a stage bigger than anything the team has seen before. What most viewers do not realize is that some of the people standing in that sequence are not actors. They are the real thing. The IHSAA official greeting Hickory at courtside is Ray Kraft, an actual starting guard on the 1954 Milan team that inspired the entire film. Tom Carnegie, who called the real Milan versus Muncie Central Championship on Indiana television 3 decades earlier, reprised his role as the PA announcer on screen. Legendary Crispus Attucks coach Ray Crow and Bailey Robertson, older brother of Oscar Robertson, were cast as the opposing South Bend Central coaches, a quiet tribute to the black powerhouse programs the fictional opponent was partly drawn from. Director David Anspaugh kept his formal contact with real Milan players limited throughout production, partly to avoid legal complications, but he found a way to bring a handful of them back into the story anyway, hiding them in plain sight inside the sequence being made in their honor. Think about that the next time the championship scene plays. The officials and coaches you barely register in the background are the actual participants in the miracle being fictionalized around them. And the player everyone watches most closely in that sequence had absolutely no business being in the film at all. Number 13, those jump shots. The pure, unhurried mechanics. The ball leaving Jimmy Chitwood's hands and barely disturbing the net. It looks like the work of someone who has been doing this his entire life. Turns out, the actor behind those shots spent most of his youth being told he was not good enough to play. Maris Valainis was a Purdue engineering student when casting director Ken Carlson spotted him at a church open gym session in Indianapolis. Valainis had been cut from Bishop Chatard High School's basketball team multiple times as an undersized freshman. He was reportedly on the verge of walking out of the audition line entirely before Carlson pulled him back. Screenwriter Angelo Pizzo had a very specific reason for writing Jimmy Chitwood with almost no dialogue. The role was described as all about behavior, all about action, because Valainis had zero acting training. Giving him extended scenes to perform would have exposed a limitation the production could not afford, so Pizzo engineered around it. 2 or 3 lines across the entire film, everything else communicated through body language and stillness. That creative workaround produced one of cinema's most iconic taciturn characters. Jimmy Chitwood's famous quiet is not restrained method-style performance. It is a screenwriter solving a casting problem and accidentally creating something unforgettable. The players around Jimmy were discovered through an audition process so chaotic that a major governing body eventually had to step in. Number 12. The Hickory locker room scenes feel completely lived in. The team's camaraderie, the nervous jokes before big games, the way the players look at each other when things go wrong. None of that was manufactured by experienced actors drawing on craft. Most of those young men had never stood in front of a camera before. Of all the actors playing Hickory Huskers, only David Nydorf, who played Everett, was a trained professional brought in from Los Angeles. Roughly 300 to 550 Indiana teenagers auditioned at an open call in Indianapolis in late summer of 1985. Nydorf reportedly turned down a role in Ferris Bueller's Day Off to take Hoosiers instead. The part he passed on went to Charlie Sheen. Angelo, Pizzo, and director David Anspaugh made a deliberate choice to house the young cast together at a budget Ramada Inn, while Gene Hackman and Dennis Hopper stayed elsewhere. The forced proximity created organic team chemistry that no amount of rehearsal could have manufactured. The young actors reportedly caused significant property damage at the hotel involving BB guns, which says something about how well the bonding actually worked. The story has a strange postscript. After the film's release, 5 of the young player actors were suspended 3 games each by the NCAA for accepting payment to play basketball on screen. None of them would have been in the film if the project had not survived nearly 2 years of being turned down by everyone in Hollywood. Number 11. The opening act of Hoosiers carries the quiet confidence of a studio prestige production. The pacing is deliberate. The framing is classical. Everything about it signals a filmmaker who knows exactly what he is doing. That confidence is the great creative illusion of the film because David Anspaugh had never directed a feature before anyone agreed to let him make this one. Anspaugh's entire professional resume was television. He had worked as an associate producer on Hill Street Blues and directed episodes of Saint Elsewhere and Miami Vice. When he and Angelo Pizzo began pitching the project, studio after studio declined. A 1950s small-town basketball drama from a first-time feature director was not a compelling investment, and the industry made that clear for approximately 2 years. Hemdale Film Corporation, fresh off producing Platoon, finally said yes in 1985. They greenlit the project on the condition that Pizzo retained meaningful creative control. Orion Pictures came aboard as the distributor. The path to production had finally opened, but not before Pizzo's first full draft reportedly ran over 230 pages, a document he later called a total mess and said he hated every minute of writing. The film's assured surface was earned through years of rejection and a complete reworking of its own screenplay. Nearly every major Hollywood studio had already passed. Once Orion came aboard, they immediately began dismantling what Pizzo had fought to build. Number 10. There is a moment in Hoosiers that has confused viewers for decades. Buddy gets kicked off the team by Coach Dale. Then, without any real explanation, he reappears in uniform and rejoins the group. It looks like a continuity error. It is not. It is the visible scar of a studio cutting a scene that explained what happened in between. Angelo Pizzo has said that Orion Pictures ordered approximately 14 scenes removed to get the runtime under 2 hours. Buddy's reinstatement was one of them. A Harvest Festival montage that Pizzo called the best piece of film poetry David and I have done together was cut entirely. The rough cut reportedly exceeded 3 hours. The theatrical version runs 114 minutes. The studio also demanded the title be changed to The Last Shot, arguing that Hoosiers meant nothing to audiences outside Indiana. When the film was released internationally, it went out under the title Best Shot. The domestic title survived only after a test screening in Irvine, California, reportedly scored 95. Said to be the highest result in Orion's history at that point. The plot gaps that careful viewers notice are not the product of lazy storytelling. They are literal missing footage, scenes that were filmed and then taken away from the people who made them. The studio's editorial decisions were not the only force working against the production. The Indiana weather was doing its own damage every single day. Number 9. The visual texture of Hoosiers is one of its defining qualities. That overcast, melancholy autumn light. The sense of a world that exists just after the harvest, when the fields are empty and the cold is settling in. It feels like a deliberate aesthetic choice, a cinematographer and director working in perfect alignment toward a specific mood. It was also in large part a weather emergency. Angelo Pizzo has said it rained during approximately 95% of their roughly 39-day shoot, which ran from October through December of 1985. Cinematographer Fred Murphy leaned into the persistent gloom, using diffusion techniques inside gymnasiums and classrooms that produced the film's distinctive painterly low-light quality. The championship finale at Hinkle Fieldhouse created its own logistical crisis. Only 200 to 300 extras showed up on the first call when the scene required thousands of spectators. Producers responded by convincing the Indiana High School Athletic Association to relocate an actual Broad Ripple versus Bishop Chatard high school game to Hinkle Fieldhouse and filmed the Hoosiers championship sequences during the extended halftime. Producers reportedly donated $1 per spectator to each attendee's chosen charity to encourage the crowd to stay and cooperate. The visual identity you associate with Indiana small-town dignity was built out of a filming crisis. The most difficult storm of the shoot, though, was happening inside the set between the leading man and his director. Number 8. Watching Gene Hackman as Coach Dale, it is easy to assume the collaboration between actor and director was a smooth one. Hackman seems completely comfortable in the role, fully in command of every scene. The reality behind those scenes was considerably more hostile. David Anspaugh has said that Hackman's frustration with a first-time feature director pushed him toward a genuine nervous breakdown. Technical advisor Strat Strategos recalls Hackman memorizing his dialogue only 15 minutes before each shooting session. At one point, Hackman turned to Anspaugh directly on camera and asked, "Are you even watching me?" Hackman's agent was simultaneously making active efforts to have Anspaugh removed from the production. Producers intervened by screening 30 minutes of dailies directly to Hackman's agent to demonstrate that the footage was working. Angelo Pizzo has confirmed that the set was not a peaceful place, describing blow-ups on the set, some throwing of jackets and near fistfights as part of the daily reality. Late in post-production, Anspaugh arranged a private early cut for Hackman. Hackman reportedly removed his glasses afterward, said something genuinely surprised and complimentary, and walked directly into the recording booth to lay down his additional dialogue without further conflict. The authority you see from Coach Dale on screen survived genuine and sustained combat between the star and the man behind the camera. Some of the film's most remembered moments, however, came from actors who simply decided to ignore what was written. Alright, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 7, what's your favorite Hoosiers quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. Number 7. There is a moment late in Hoosiers that stops the breath every time. Tiny Ollie stepping to the free throw line in the regional final. The whole season balanced on his shoulders. And then the underhanded release. The ball arcing through the silence. Both shots falling in. It was completely unplanned. Wade Schenk improvised the granny-style technique entirely on set. Angelo Pizzo's screenplay did not specify how Ollie would shoot. Schenk decided the underhand method in the moment, and director David Anspaugh let it stay. That same openness to improvisation shaped some of the film's most quoted lines. Dennis Hopper created several of Shooter's most recognized bench comments, including "Don't get caught watching the paint dry" and "Son, kick their butt," entirely between takes. Gene Hackman contributed Scout's honor in a separate scene through the same process. Anspaugh's willingness to absorb and keep actor inventions rather than overrule them was a skill he had developed during years working on Hill Street Blues. He recognized good material when it appeared in front of him, regardless of whether it came from the script or from the performer standing in front of the camera. The lines and moments viewers quote most and rewind most often were invented by people who chose not to follow instructions on a given day. The film's single most tactical scene, though, was not invented at all. It was borrowed almost directly from something that actually happened in 1954. Number 6. Dale pulling a tape measure from his pocket inside Hinkle Fieldhouse. Quietly, almost casually, walking to the basket and confirming that the rim is the same 10 feet high it has always been. It is the film's most understated coaching moment, and most audiences assume it was invented by a screenwriter at a desk. It was not. Real Milan coach Marvin Wood actually measured the rim and free throw line before the 1954 state championship to settle his players' nerves in the face of a venue far larger than anything they had seen. Angelo Pizzo recognized the detail as exactly the kind of small human gesture that speaks louder than any speech, and he kept it intact. The filming took place at Hinkle Fieldhouse, then still known as Butler Fieldhouse, the exact venue where Bobby Plump hit the actual game-winning shot on March 20th, 1954. Pizzo also considered including Milan player Bob Engel's real remark from that day, "Put a lot of hay in this place, couldn't you?" but chose the tape measure because it played better as an image than as a line. By anchoring the scene in documented history, Pizzo gave Hackman something precise to play. The moment that audiences most readily assume is a screenwriter's invention is the one time Pizzo put the creative work down and let the truth do the job. The character he most thoroughly fictionalized had the most to lose when the studio started exercising its authority. Number 5. Late in Hoosiers, Coach Dale and Myra Fleener share a kiss that many viewers find emotionally abrupt. The relationship between them has not quite earned that moment by the time it arrives, and the scene carries an awkward weight that is hard to explain away as intentional. Here is what actually happened. The scenes that would have made it work were removed from the film after Barbara Hershey finished filming them. Angelo Pizzo has said that Orion's mandated cuts eliminated multiple Myra Dale scenes meant to precede that moment, collapsing what was written as a gradual relationship into something that, in his own words, feels unearned. 3 of Hershey's scenes reportedly ended up on the cutting room floor. David Anspaugh has described Hershey as miserable a lot of the time on location in rural Indiana. Pizzo has stated that Hershey, who came directly from Woody Allen's Hannah and Her Sisters and would next film Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ, has declined to participate in any Hoosiers publicity since the film's original release. This account comes from Pizzo. Hershey has never publicly addressed these claims herself. The romantic subplot feels thin not because it was underwritten, but because its structural core was literally taken away after the actress delivered it. The thinness you notice is scar tissue, not design. The film's most famous dramatic moment survived a nearly identical kind of last-minute pressure from the people trying to control how the film was made. Number 4. Jimmy, rising from the wing. The arena going completely silent. The ball leaving his hands, climbing, falling, and dropping through the net. The entire gymnasium erupting. It is the moment Hoosiers is built toward, and it has the quality of something almost too perfect to be believed. Maris Valainis made that shot on the very first take, after missing virtually every warm-up attempt in the time before cameras rolled. David Anspaugh deliberately placed Valainis slightly farther from the basket than Bobby Plump had actually shot from in 1954, because the greater distance felt more dramatic. Gene Hackman's representatives reportedly pushed Anspaugh to move the shooter closer. Anspaugh refused. The euphoria that follows the make is entirely real. Anspaugh has admitted that he forgot to choreograph what anyone should do when the ball went in. The cheerleaders crying, the South Bend players dropping to the floor, the celebrations surging around Valainis are all genuine reactions captured in the moment by people who were not expecting the shot to fall on the first attempt. A backup take was filmed as insurance, but the version audiences remember is the one that happened cold, before anyone had time to prepare. You are not watching a polished production sequence when that ball goes through. You are watching people actually surprised. That kind of moment cannot be planned. The entire role and that entire shot could have belonged to a completely different actor if one early phone call had gone another way. Number 3. Gene Hackman's Coach Dale is so deeply embedded in the character at this point that imagining anyone else in the role requires genuine effort. It feels inevitable. It was not even close to inevitable. Hackman was not the first choice, or the second. Angelo Pizzo originally wrote the role with Robert Duvall in mind. Before any formal casting process began, Jack Nicholson, a longtime personal friend of Pizzo's, read the script and called to say he had to play the coach. Pizzo has credited that phone call as the one person probably most responsible for getting the movie made, because Nicholson's expressed interest signaled to the industry that the material was worth taking seriously. Nicholson then withdrew. An active lawsuit with MGM reportedly barred him from working for 6 months. He called Pizzo, told him to find someone else, and added, "You have my blessing." Meanwhile, Harry Dean Stanton had been the first choice for shooter. But according to Pizzo, Stanton's agent reportedly never passed the script to him at all. Hackman eventually accepted the role for a reported $400,000, well below his standard rate, in exchange for a gross profit percentage. He later sued Hemdale and HBO over that arrangement in 1989. The performance audiences have loved for nearly 4 decades is effectively a third-choice casting compromise built on financial constraints and a legal calendar. And Hackman was so certain the compromise was a mistake that he told his co-star exactly what he expected to happen. Number 2. The bench chemistry between Coach Dale and Shooter is part of what gives Hoosiers its emotional center. Those quiet practice montage moments, the two of them side by side, coach and assistant, each carrying something the other quietly understands. It was filmed while Gene Hackman was privately convinced the whole project was a disaster. During one of those bench setups, Hackman reportedly leaned over to Dennis Hopper and muttered that he hoped both of them had invested well because they would never work again after this film. On his last day of shooting, Hackman told Angelo Pizzo separately that the film would end up forgotten and that he hoped to put it out of his mind once his plane landed in Los Angeles. David Anspaugh reportedly learned about the exchange with Hopper only years after the fact. Throughout the shoot, Hackman's agent had been working to have Anspaugh removed. Hackman reportedly referred to himself on set as the Black Cloud. The atmosphere around the production's leading man was one of sustained, genuine pessimism. The film he was so certain about became some of the most enduring work of his career. Hoosiers now ranks 4th on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest sports films ever made. The confident authority you see from Coach Dale was delivered by an actor who believed he was walking toward professional ruin with every take. The co-star who heard that warning had considerably more at stake than Hackman realized. Number 1. The most quietly devastating moment in Hoosiers does not happen on a basketball court. It happens in a hospital room. Shooter lying alone, the radio on, listening to the championship his son is playing in while he stays behind in detox. It only exists because Dennis Hopper refused to film the scene as originally written. Angelo Pizzo's screenplay had Shooter breaking out of detox and making it to the arena. Hopper rejected the scene. His reasoning was direct. It would suggest that Shooter did not take his own recovery seriously, and that was not a message he was willing to put on screen. Hopper was reportedly approximately 2 months out of rehabilitation when filming began in fall 1985. Hoosiers was said to be his first fully sober film production. He shot the film back-to-back with David Lynch's Blue Velvet. That combination, alongside River's Edge, collectively revived a career that most of the industry had written off entirely. Hopper also invented Shooter's stovepipe hat over David Anspaugh's direct objections. When Anspaugh warned the hat would get him laughed off the screen, Hopper replied simply, "Trust me, it'll work." The rewrite Hopper insisted upon earned him the only Academy Award nomination of his career, Best Supporting Actor, which he lost to Michael Caine. Every scene of Shooter's fragile recovery is an actor pulling from his own recent experience. That performance is not research, it is memory. Hoosiers arrived in theaters in November 1986, backed by a studio that wanted to change the title and shrink the film into something more manageable. What audiences received was assembled from rain-drenched Indiana shoots, a director fighting to keep his job, a screenwriter watching 14 scenes disappear, and a cast of real amateur athletes who barely knew how a film set worked. Jack Nicholson walked away. Dennis Hopper rewrote his own arc from lived experience. Maris Valainis made a shot he had been missing all morning. None of it was guaranteed. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, I'll make it. We'll see you next time.